When I moved into the ground floor room of a shared student house in the UK, I didn't expect much beyond loud music, cold showers, and the occasional arguments over dishes. It was a creaky old house, the kind with thin walls and drafty windows, but the rent was cheap and the university was just a 15-minute walk away. My room opened directly onto a small backyard, not much more than a narrow patch of concrete boxed in by high moss-covered brick walls. The only door connecting that backyard to the street was a flimsy wooden one that looked like it hadn't been replaced in decades. We didn't trust the lock, so one of my housemates, George, had the idea to tie a rope around the inside handle and anchor it to a metal hook we screwed into the wall. Not foolproof, but it held. We got used to that door, that rope, the little routines of tightening and checking it each night. Everyone sort of forgot it was there after a while, until the night I saw the blood. It was a Wednesday, cold even for late autumn. I was cleaning up in the kitchen when something outside the window caught my eye. A smear of red on glass, then a sudden thud. I leaned closer, heart already pounding, and saw one of the men from next door. He was standing in his own backyard, clutching his arm, blood spilling through his fingers. His shirt was soaked, and a long gash ran down his forearm like someone had tried to peel it open. I didn't think. I just reacted. Ran outside, pulled him through our kitchen door, and got him seated. He said nothing, just stared ahead with this hollow, glazed expression. I grabbed a clean shirt from the laundry basket and pressed it to his arm. My hand shook. The air smelled metallic, sharp. When the police arrived, they found his attacker, another man from that same flat, crouched in their hallway, eyes wide and distant. He didn't resist. They said it was a fight that got out of hand. No further details. The man I helped never came back to thank me. In fact, after that night, I never saw him again. What stuck with me wasn't the blood or the sirens or the screaming that came before them. It was his face, not in pain, not even afraid. Just gone, as if something had already taken him long before the knife ever did. That night, I locked my window, tied the rope on the backyard door tight. But deep down, something in me whispered it wouldn't be enough. A few weeks passed after the incident with the bleeding man next door. Life at the house limped back into its usual rhythm. Lectures, laundry, takeaway dinners. But something about the atmosphere had changed. Like the air itself had thickened, made heavier by something we couldn't name. The backyard door stayed tied. Every night, I'd check it twice before bed, then lay awake longer than I should, ears tuned to the smallest creak or shuffle. My boyfriend had started staying over more frequently, not out of romance, but out of caution. Neither of us said it aloud, but we both knew something was wrong. Then came the night the rope was cut. I had gone outside for a smoke, pacing slowly in the backyard, the kind of cold that sinks into your fingertips. It was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual TV noise from the flat next door was missing. When I came back in through the front door, I went to the kitchen to lock up for the night. And that's when I saw it. The backyard door was ajar, just slightly, just enough. The rope we always tied across the inside handle was on the floor, cleanly sliced, the ends frayed but deliberate. It hadn't come undone on its own. Someone had cut it. For a long time, I just stood there. My heart was racing, but my feet wouldn't move. I tried to convince myself it was one of my housemates being careless, but the rope was ours, and none of them ever touched it. Eventually, I shut the door, retied what was left of the rope, didn't tell anyone. The silence that night was louder than anything I'd ever heard. The next morning, I asked everyone in the house if they had been in the backyard. One shook his head sleepily. Another didn't even know we used a rope to keep that door shut. I let it drop, not wanting to sound paranoid. But inside, I was certain. Someone had been there. Someone had come in. And if they could do it once, they could do it again. So I began keeping things near the bed. Not weapons, just preparation. Phone charged, shoes by the door, coat laid out, small defenses. My boyfriend noticed but didn't question it. Neither of us slept well after that. We didn't know it yet, but the worst was only 2 nights away. The night it happened started like any other. Cold, still, and quiet. Too quiet. I remember waking up to the sound, not from a dream, but from something real. A bang, not a knock, not a creak. A full-bodied, gut-punching bang, like something heavy had slammed into the back of the house. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. But my boyfriend was already sitting upright beside me, holding his breath. We didn't speak. We didn't move. Then came the sound of the backyard door creaking. That door, the same one we had tied with rope, then retied after it had been cut, was opening. From inside my room, I heard the groan of rusted hinges and the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. Slow, deliberate footsteps crossed the yard. Then they stopped. Right outside my bedroom window, I wanted to sit up to peek through the curtain, but instinct pinned me down like a weight across my chest. My boyfriend leaned toward me just enough to whisper, "Don't move." Then the window lock shifted. It was faint, like someone fumbling with the latch. The glass began to slide sideways, slow and cautious, just a few centimeters at first, then more. Someone was trying to come in. A voice followed, low, muffled, speaking quickly in a language I couldn't place. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just steady, like whoever was outside thought they wouldn't be heard. Another voice joined in, this one closer, breathing faster. That's when I saw a hand. It reached inside, fingers curled, tugging the frame gently. I locked eyes with my boyfriend, and that's when panic finally took control. We threw off the covers, grabbed our phones, yanked on shoes and jackets with shaking hands. I remember thinking, don't scream. Screaming might make it worse. We slipped out of the room as quietly as we could and ran down the hall, banging on every door we passed. My flatmates answered in various states of confusion and half-sleep. But once they saw our faces, once they realized something was really happening, the panic spread fast. One of them called the police. The dispatcher didn't waste time. Within minutes, flashing lights spilled through the curtains, followed by loud voices shouting commands. I heard a scuffle outside. 2 people running, then shouts, then silence. We weren't allowed to go near the backyard while officers searched it. Eventually, they brought 2 men into the front garden in cuffs. One was half laughing, still holding a half-burned joint. The other had been hiding behind our fence, crouched low in the weeds. When the police searched their flat next door, they found meth, heroin, and a kitchen knife so large it looked like it belonged in a horror movie. We were told, unofficially, that they might have been casing our house for weeks. That night, none of us slept. We stayed huddled in the living room, lights on, jumping at every sound. The image of that hand at the window, it stayed with me. Because it wasn't just someone breaking in, it was how quiet they had been, how careful, like they'd done it before. The police left just before sunrise. Their words were clipped and calm. "You did the right thing. You're safe now." But none of it made me feel any better. What hit me hardest wasn't the break-in or the knife they found, or even the way those two men had been creeping outside the house in the middle of the night. It was how long the silence lasted afterward. In the days that followed, no one really talked. My flatmates kept their doors shut, meals were skipped, lights stayed on longer. Everyone walked softer, like we were afraid the house itself might wake up. I started hearing things, small things at first. Creaks in the hallway, the thud of a cabinet shutting when no one was in the kitchen. I'd get up to check, but I was always alone. Then came the dreams. I'd wake up certain someone was standing at the foot of the bed, staring. One night, I swore I saw a shadow cross the window, inside. I lunged for the light switch and knocked over a glass of water. Nothing was there. My boyfriend didn't say it, but he was unraveling too. He stopped sleeping altogether, started spending the night scrolling through security camera listings, mumbling about motion detectors. I caught him one morning pushing a small chair under the window, wedging it there like a barricade. He looked up and just said, "Just in case." The worst part was the backyard. I couldn't look at it. Every time I walked past the kitchen, my eyes would flick to the door and that knot of rope we'd retied over and over again. It had once felt like enough. Now it looked like a joke. I tried to leave the house one afternoon just to breathe somewhere else, but when I touched the doorknob, something in me recoiled, like I was stepping into something unfinished, like the house wasn't done with me. It wasn't just fear, it was waiting, a tension that didn't break when the intruders were arrested. It settled. The landlord replaced the door eventually, upgraded the locks, even installed a new camera above the back gate. But it didn't matter, because the damage was never in the hardware. It was in us. And every now and then, when the nights get too quiet, I still find myself listening to the window, listening for footsteps, for whispers I don't understand, for the silence that comes just before someone tries to open the glass. Story 2. The Apartment Next Door. When I was 8, my parents and I moved into a decaying apartment complex on the edge of town. The hallways always smelled like boiled cabbage and old carpet, and every floorboard seemed to groan under the weight of secrets. Ours was Unit 209, wedged between a laundry room that always flooded and the unit nobody ever visited, Unit 211. Unit 211 belonged to an old woman and her middle-aged son, who everyone just called Mr. A. I never heard his real name, and I never saw the woman after we moved in. My parents said she was bedridden. Mr. A, though, he was always around, wandering the halls at night in soft slippers, mumbling to himself and dragging one foot behind him like it refused to keep up. I remember hearing him the very first night we arrived. I was curled on our worn couch, listening through the thin wall that separated our unit from theirs. His voice was a low, gravelly hum, like he was chanting something just under his breath, too faint to understand, but loud enough to keep me awake. One morning, about 2 weeks after we moved in, I stepped out to check the mailbox. That's when I noticed it. The door to 211 was cracked open, not wide, just a sliver, but enough that I could see a line of blackness behind it. The weird thing? That door was heavy, rusted at the hinges. It always shut with a boom, like it was weighted. It shouldn't have been ajar at all. I stood frozen, staring at the narrow slice of darkness. Then the door slammed shut. I jumped so hard I dropped the stack of mail. I tried to laugh it off, even convinced myself maybe a draft had done it. But that hallway never had windows, and the air always hung thick and still. That afternoon, it happened again. As I came back from school, the door was open, just like before. Same crack, same black line. I didn't go near it this time. I ran straight into our apartment and locked the door behind me. The next few days, it became a pattern. Every day after school, the door to 211 was open, just enough to notice. I never saw Mr. A come or go. No footsteps, no creaking hinges. Just that door, always slightly ajar, like it was waiting. I told my parents, but they brushed it off. "He's an old man. Probably forgets to close it," my dad said. My mom told me not to snoop. But I knew something was wrong. You don't forget to close a door that heavy. And sometimes, I swear I could hear breathing behind it. Then one night, something changed. I woke up to a loud click. The hallway light outside our apartment flickered through the frosted glass of our door. I got up, padded quietly to the peephole, and looked through. The door to 211 was open again. Only this time, I saw movement inside. A shape. Not Mr. A. Someone bigger, hunched over just out of view. And for the first time, I heard the floor creak toward the door. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I asked my mom if she'd seen Mr. A recently. She paused, confused. "Come to think of it, no," she said. "But I hear him walking at night." I didn't tell her I wasn't sure it was him anymore. By the end of that week, I started keeping a baseball bat under my bed. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but the door never stayed shut. And whatever was inside was starting to come closer. After that night, something in me changed. I didn't sleep much anymore, not really. I'd lie in bed with my eyes glued to the glowing red digits of my alarm clock, ears straining to catch every creak in the hallway, every shuffling footstep that might belong to Mr. A, or something pretending to be him. My friend Daniel didn't talk to me for a week. I think it scared him more than he let on. He told me he didn't remember seeing a face, just that arm, thick, grayish, too long, and the sound it made when the shovel connected, like something that wasn't meant to feel pain had felt it for the first time. The police came the next day, but by the end, Unit 211 was locked again. They knocked. No answer. When they finally forced it open, the place was cold, dark, and completely empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. No furniture, no dishes, no signs of life, not even dust. Like no one had ever lived there at all. That night, my parents told me we were going to stay with my aunt for a while just until things calmed down. But that never happened. Not really. Because he didn't stay in 211. He followed me. It started with the noises, soft knocks on the windows of my aunt's second-story apartment, then tapping on my bedroom walls, the kind that echoed in pairs, always spaced exactly 4 seconds apart. Then the dreams. In every one I was standing outside that same apartment door. The crack was still there, but now I could see 2 eyes watching me through the gap, poiled, wet, and unblinking. I couldn't move. My feet were glued to the carpet, and slowly the door would begin to open wider. Every time I woke up, the air in my room felt heavy, like someone had just been there, like someone had been standing right next to me. The final straw came 2 weeks later. We had returned to our apartment briefly, just to gather more of our things. My mom didn't want me going near the hallway, but I couldn't help myself. I crept toward Unit 211, telling myself it was just a door, just a room. But this time, something was different. There was a sound coming from inside. Not movement, breathing. Deep, labored, like someone was just inches behind that door, chest rising and falling with effort. I held my breath, and then the door handle twitched. I ran. I didn't tell my mom what I'd heard, just begged her to leave. We packed up in less than 20 minutes. When we left, I glanced over my shoulder. The door to 211 was wide open, and in the darkness just beyond the threshold, something was crouching. Not Mr. A. Not even human. We didn't stay away forever. A few months later, life forced us back. My aunt's place got too crowded, and my parents, pressed for money, thought returning to the apartment would teach me not to let fear win. But fear had never left. It had followed us. And now, back in that crumbling building, it waited for me, just a wall away. Mr. A was officially listed as moved out. The landlord claimed he'd left suddenly and quietly, taking his sick mother with him, but no moving truck had ever come, and no neighbors remembered seeing him leave. What I did see were the scratch marks, thin, deliberate gouges carved into the inside of my closet wall, 3 long lines about shoulder height, angled downward like claw marks. My mom said they'd always been there, but I knew every inch of that closet. Those scratches were new. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of the sounds, though they'd returned too, but because I could feel something behind that wall, something watching, waiting. At around 2:30 a.m., I heard a thud inside the wall next to my bed. Just one, then silence. I pressed my ear against the wallpaper. Nothing. Then, whispering. Not voices, not words. More like breath moving with purpose, like something was speaking through exhalation. And it was close. Too close. The next day I begged my mom to switch rooms with me. She refused, said it was time to grow up. But when I came home from school, I found her staring at my bedroom wall. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she'd heard it too. That week, I stopped sleeping in my bed. I started keeping a flashlight tucked into my hoodie and a hammer under my mattress. Every night, I camped out on the living room floor with the TV on mute and one eye on the hallway. And every night, around the same time, 2:30, the scratching would begin. From inside the walls, first in my bedroom, then the hallway, then closer, always closer. One night, I cracked. I stayed up until everyone was asleep, then crept into my room with the hammer. I started tapping lightly on the closet wall. Nothing. Then I knocked harder, and on the third knock, something knocked back. 3 slow taps, same rhythm. I froze. Then the knocking continued, faster now, from inside the wall, scraping, then pounding. It felt like the drywall would collapse inward. I fell back, heart racing. The scratching stopped. And then, a voice. It rasped directly through the wall. "You never closed the door." I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the stairwell. I don't even remember opening the front door. I just remember the cold air outside, my bare feet on the cement, the burn in my lungs. My dad found me huddled on the steps 20 minutes later. I told him everything. For once, he didn't tell me to grow up. He just looked back at our apartment door and said quietly, "We're moving out tomorrow." That night was our last in Unit 209. We all slept in the living room. packed and ready to leave. I kept my flashlight on the whole time. But just before sunrise, the TV, long unplugged, flickered to life. The screen showed static. Then a hallway, our hallway, and that same door, wide open. We left just after sunrise. I didn't look back until we were halfway down the street. When I did, the door to Unit 211 was open again, wide, dark, and hollow. No one stood in it, but it felt like something watched from inside. Something that didn't need to be seen to be real. Years passed. We never went back. I told myself it was over. But a few weeks ago, I moved into a new apartment across the city. Temporary housing until I found something better. On the first night, I noticed a faint seam in the wall inside the hallway closet. It looked like a door frame that had been sealed over, painted to match the rest of the drywall. The next night, the seam was wider, a hairline shift, just enough to be noticeable. By the third night, I heard breathing behind it, deep, rhythmic, wet. I pressed my ear to the wall and froze. Behind the plaster, something moved, slow and deliberate. Then a voice rasped out. Still open. I backed away, shut the closet, and pushed a chair against the door. At 2:30 a.m., I woke to a soft tapping sound. 3 knocks, slow and even, coming from inside the wall. The tapping didn't stop. It never got louder. It just kept going. I didn't sleep. The following night, the seam had split wider. It wasn't cracked plaster anymore. It was an actual gap, like the wall was peeling itself open. I tried to ignore it, but at 2:30 again, the voice came back. You brought it? I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just stared as a shape pressed slowly against the inside of the wall, bulging outward like something was testing the barrier. I turned on every light in the apartment, but it didn't matter. At 2:31, the hammer I kept under the bed slid halfway across the floor on its own, not thrown, pulled. Last night, I tried to sleep at a friend's place, but at exactly 2:30, their hallway closet creaked open by itself. Inside, nothing. No coat rack, no shelves, just smooth gray walls and a dark seam down the center. I left without waking them, didn't explain. I just knew. It's not about where I live. It's about what I saw. It's about what grabbed me. It's about what I never really escaped. And now I know. It was never an apartment. It was a door. And I was the one who left it open. Story 3. The Airbnb Horror. It was supposed to be a quiet escape. Just one night away from the noise of my parents' house, a little break from me and my boyfriend. We booked a modest Airbnb in a quiet condo complex on the edge of town. Unit 6B, a corner rental tucked beneath a 2-story building with a small gated courtyard. The check-in instructions were simple: a lockbox by the door, a motion light to guide the way. But from the moment we stepped out of the car, something felt off. The complex was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence either, more like the kind that makes your ears ring. Even the cicadas had stopped their chatter, and then we saw her. There, in the dark window of the apartment above ours, a figure stood motionless behind the curtain. A woman. At least, I think it was a woman. Her spine bent in a permanent hunch, long gray hair hanging in clumps around her face. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, stared down at us like she had been waiting. Not curious, not confused, just watching. I tried to play it off. People look out their windows. Maybe she was just old. Maybe her posture was from arthritis or something. But when we reached the stairs to our unit, she was already there, standing at the top, arms folded tightly across her chest, her thin lips pressed into a hard line. Still watching. She didn't speak, not a word, not a blink. I forced a smile, muttered something like, "Evening," and hurried past her to the door. The condo itself was cozy. Neutral furniture, clean kitchen, a faint scent of lemon from the cleaning supplies. We tried to laugh it off, tried to forget the woman upstairs. We made dinner, watched a few episodes of a show, and eventually settled into bed, the soft hum of the ceiling fan lulling us into uneasy sleep. But sometime after 4 a.m., a sound shattered the stillness. Bang, bang, bang. The front door shook on its hinges. My heart leapt to my throat. My boyfriend shot upright beside me, already reaching for his phone. I crept toward the peephole, stomach twisting. On the other side of the door, under the flickering porch light, something lay on the welcome mat. 3 rats, dead, torn apart, gutted. One of them was missing its head. The other 2 stared blankly at the door, blood soaking the concrete. I gasped and stumbled back, nearly slipping. We didn't open the door. We didn't dare. I called the host, my fingers trembling. She answered groggily, surprised, and promised she'd talk to the neighbor upstairs. No apology, no urgency. Just a strange calm in her voice that didn't match what was happening. We stayed up the rest of the night, wide-eyed and listening to every creak, every shadow shifting in the dark. When the sun rose, it barely helped. The daylight didn't bring comfort. It just showed us what the night had hidden. And the woman? She was still there, standing outside, this time in the courtyard, staring at our car. We didn't know it yet, but the worst was still to come. We didn't leave right away. After the police came and the woman upstairs was taken inside, still muttering, still clinging to something invisible, we debated packing up. But the host offered a full refund and even promised to cover a night at a nearby hotel if anything else happened. She claimed the woman had some kind of episode and insisted it was safe now. We were too tired to argue, too curious, too stupid. So we stayed. By evening, it felt like the horror of the morning had stretched into a bad dream. The courtyard was quiet again. No shrieking, no dead animals, just silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden stairs above us. We tried to ignore it. Still, we kept the blinds shut. We double-checked the locks. We placed a chair under the doorknob before bed, just in case. I was drifting into sleep when I heard it. Soft at first, like someone dragging nails along the wall. A dry, deliberate scritch, scritch, scritch. I opened my eyes and held my breath. The sound moved slowly along the bedroom wall, behind the headboard. My boyfriend stirred, then sat up, listening. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. We both froze, staring at the wall as the sound paused, then resumed, more frantic now. Scritch, 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 scratch, scratch. He got up and pressed his ear against the wall. "It's inside," he whispered. "Inside the wall." We stood there for a minute, not moving, and then, from somewhere above, came the sound of something heavy dragging across the floor. Furniture, or something worse. Then, thump, a knock, not on the door, from the ceiling. Thump, 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 rhythmic, angry, directly above us. I grabbed his hand. "We need to leave." He agreed this time. No argument. We packed fast, tossing clothes into backpacks, stuffing toiletries into our shoes. I barely stopped to brush my teeth. But before we could leave, we heard a loud crash outside. Metal on pavement. We peeked out the front window. The woman. She was at our car again, standing in the glow of the porch light, her thin arms raised above her head like she was holding something. Her face was wet, sweat, tears, I don't know, but her mouth was moving. We couldn't hear what she was saying, but I swear I saw her mouth the words, "Don't go. It'll follow." And then she hurled something onto the hood of the car. We both flinched. It was a bird, a crow, maybe. Its wings mangled, its eyes still open. The second dead thing left for us. That was enough. We backed away from the window and started calling another hotel. But just before I stepped out to leave, I noticed something new on the bedroom wall, along the paint where we'd heard the scratching. A hairline crack, fresh, long, curving across the plaster like a map of veins. Something had been inside the wall, and whatever it was getting closer. We should have left. Every instinct said to run, but exhaustion has a way of numbing fear. It was past midnight by the time we got off the phone with the hotel nearby. Everything was booked thanks to some local event. And the host again insisted the neighbor had episodes, swore she lived alone, and promised she wouldn't bother us again. She even offered to send someone to check the wall in the morning, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That crack. It hadn't been there when we arrived. By 2:17 a.m., sleep had become impossible. My boyfriend had passed out with the light on, but I just lay there staring at the ceiling fan and listening, waiting, watching shadows shift along the corners of the room. Then I heard it again, the scratching. It had moved, no longer behind the bed, but beneath the floorboards now, beneath the laminate tiles in the hallway just outside the bedroom. The scraping sound was sharper now, more frantic, like claws, long, brittle claws scrabbling for release. I crept out of bed, careful not to wake him, and stepped into the hallway. I flipped the switch. The overhead light buzzed on, weak and flickering. Nothing, but I swear I felt something, a low hum, deep inside the wall, like the vibration of a voice too low to hear, not a sound, a pressure. I knelt down and pressed my palm to the wall, warm, too warm. Then, without warning, the bathroom door behind me creaked open. I spun around, empty, no draft, no air movement, just the door, now ajar, and the mirror inside catching my reflection, only it didn't. Not exactly. In the mirror, I was kneeling, but something behind me was standing, a shape, thin, unmoving, too tall, no features, no face. I turned fast, nothing there. But when I looked back at the mirror, the shape was closer, almost behind my shoulder. I slammed the door shut. That finally woke my boyfriend. He sat up groggily. "What happened?" "Something's wrong," I said. "We can't stay here. Something's inside the walls." He didn't argue this time, just grabbed his jacket and started stuffing our things into his bag. I went to the living room to grab our chargers, and then I saw the note. It hadn't been there before. A crumpled, dirty piece of paper, jammed under the front door. I picked it up carefully, expecting a complaint from a neighbor, or worse, the police asking us to vacate. But all it said was this: "Don't open the wall. Don't listen to it." The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, but it was signed at the bottom, 6A. The old woman, my blood went cold. I turned to show him the note, but then something behind the living room curtain shifted. A figure right outside the window. Not the old woman, not anyone we recognized, just a silhouette, very still. Then came the tap, 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 tap. We turned off all the lights, crouched behind the kitchen counter, and didn't speak. The tapping continued for minutes, until it didn't, and that silence was somehow worse. We didn't sleep. We didn't speak much either, just sat on the couch in silence, waiting for the sun to rise. But even daylight felt thin here, pale, as if whatever was watching us didn't care what time it was anymore. Around 7 a.m., I heard movement upstairs, slow footsteps crossing the ceiling. My boyfriend stood near the window, peeking through the blinds. He froze. "She's gone," he said. "The old woman. Her car's still there, but she's not." We should have left. But then I remembered the note. "Don't open the wall. Don't listen to it." 6th day. I couldn't explain why, but something about that warning, it felt more like a cry for help. And part of me needed to know what she meant. I needed to see where she lived. We climbed the stairs and knocked on her door. No answer. The door creaked open on its own, unlocked. Inside, it was freezing. The air smelled like dust and something older, like wet plaster or rotting paint. The apartment was nearly empty. No personal items, no decorations, nothing on the walls except cracks. Long winding splits across every surface, like veins crawling through the drywall. On the far side of the room, the wallpaper was peeled back, and a section of the wall had been crudely pried open. Not fully torn out, just cracked wide enough to see inside. We should have turned back, but instead we stepped closer. Inside the wall cavity, something was moving, slowly. Not an animal, not pipes, something thin, grayish. Fingers curling against the insulation, reaching through it. My boyfriend pulled me back, but then we heard a sound, low and croaking, like a whisper pressed through old wood. A voice. They feed on what follows. They wait for the ones who run. We turned. The old woman was standing in the hallway behind us, pale, shaking. She wasn't shouting now, just whispering, staring past us. She raised one hand and pointed toward the wall. "If you hear it speak your name, it already knows how to find you." And then, without warning, the wall split wide open, not just cracked, tore, like skin. A long vertical rip, too fast to be natural, too silent to be real. From it came something that wasn't light or shadow, but both, coiling, stretching, hungry. Not a figure, not even a shape, just a presence, a smear in the air that moved without form. It crossed the room in seconds. The old woman didn't scream. She didn't move. She only whispered one last thing as it reached her. "Now you'll see." And then she was gone, not taken, not dragged, just gone. We ran down the stairs, through the courtyard, past our car. No police, no neighbors. We didn't stop until we reached the gas station a mile down the road, where we finally caught our breath and called the police. But when they searched Unit 6A, there was no damage, no cracks, no hollow space in the wall, no sign of the woman. The officer told us the unit had been empty for months. The host never replied to our last message. That night, I lay in bed, back home, too scared to sleep. And just before dawn, I heard it again. Scritch, scritch, scritch. From inside my wall, not a sound. A greeting. Story 4. The Blizzard Apparition. We arrived at the cabin just before the storm. My parents called it a winter reset. A week without Wi-Fi, tucked deep in a Colorado valley where even the map apps gave up. It was the kind of place where the road in turned into a tunnel of snow-heavy trees, and the nearest gas station was 30 miles back. I didn't mind. Honestly, I needed the break. From school, from noise, from everything. But my little brother Josh, barely 9, was wired like a squirrel on espresso. The second our tires crunched to a stop, he'd already wriggled into his coat and bolted outside. My parents didn't even bother yelling. That was Josh's role. Always first into the cold, the dark, the unknown. The cabin was beautiful, but old, its bones groaning with every gust of wind. We spent the morning unpacking and lighting the wood stove. Snow had started falling, thin at first, like powdered sugar. By the time Josh and I ventured out, he had his plastic shovel, I had my gloves, and an eye on the sky. The storm escalated fast. White swallowed the trees. Wind howled between the peaks. But Josh insisted we keep building snow forts like we were preparing for battle. The snow came up past our knees. Then I heard it, a voice, not loud, but clear, software female. "Are you looking for your brother?" I turned so fast my neck popped. A woman stood just up the hill. The storm had blurred everything but her. She wore a long gray coat that fluttered like paper in the wind, her face shaded beneath a pale hood. Behind her was the neighbor's cabin, supposed to be empty for the winter, shuttered and dark when we'd arrived. The door was open, wide open, and the woman stood at the threshold, one hand lightly touching the frame. Her eyes never left mine. I blinked, heart stuttering. "Josh?" I called, turning to look for him. No answer. His tracks led toward the woman's porch, deep imprints in fresh snow. So I followed. The wind screamed louder the closer I got, as if trying to push me back. The footprints were clear until they reached the doorway. Then they stopped, dead at the threshold. No scuff marks, no signs of entry. Instead, the tracks doubled back toward the woods. My skin prickled as the realization dawned. Josh hadn't gone into the cabin. He was never missing. He was with me the whole time. I turned around, and there he was, right behind me, clutching his shovel, cheeks pink with cold. He looked confused. "Why'd you run off?" he asked, but I couldn't answer. The woman was gone. So was the open door. The cabin now sat dark and sealed as it had when we arrived. My breath hitched. I grabbed Josh's hand and dragged him back through the snow, heart hammering like it was trying to escape. We didn't speak on the way back. When I finally slammed our own cabin door behind us, Josh looked up at me, dead serious. "I saw her, too," he whispered. "She waved at me." I didn't sleep that night. The wind scratched at the windows like fingernails. And out there, somewhere in the white, I swear I heard her again, closer, calling. That night, the storm didn't let up. If anything, it grew angrier. The wind clawed at the windows, and snow hit the roof like thrown pebbles. My parents stayed in the main room by the fireplace, playing cards by lantern light, trying to pretend nothing was wrong. Josh had passed out under a pile of blankets on the couch, but I couldn't sleep. Not after what I saw, not after what Josh said he saw. I kept replaying it in my head, how the footprints ended right at the doorway, how that strange woman stood so still in the cold, untouched by it. It wasn't just fear I felt, it was something deeper, something I couldn't name. Like my body knew before my mind did that what I'd seen wasn't right. At some point around midnight, the lights flickered, just once at first, barely noticeable, then again, longer, and then they cut out entirely. The room went black. My mother muttered something, and my dad lit another lantern, its flame making the shadows stretch across the log walls. He checked the breaker box, cursed under his breath. Everything was still flipped correctly. Josh started whimpering in his sleep. "Is it her?" he mumbled. "She's at the window." I froze. He wasn't awake, but something in my chest told me he wasn't wrong either. I moved to the window nearest the couch. It was so frosted over I had to wipe the glass with my sleeve. Beyond it, just snow whipping across the porch in sideways sheets. But then the porch light came on. Just the porch light. No other power came back. And for a moment, I swear, I saw something at the edge of the light, a shape, like someone standing just beyond the reach of the bulb. I stepped back, heart thudding like a drumline. "Dad?" Before I could finish, a loud knock echoed from the front door. 3 short knocks, like someone politely asking to come in. We all froze. My mom stood up, lantern trembling slightly in her hand. Who the hell would be out in this? No one moved for a long second. Then Dad opened the door. There was nothing there, just the snow, the white, the wind, no footprints, no retreating figure, just the cold air pouring in like a warning. My parents blamed the wind, or the storm shifting the walls. Maybe a tree branch knocked against the door. They tried every explanation they could think of, and I could see them clinging to each one like a rope in deep water. But I knew what I saw. I knew what Josh had said in his sleep. And I knew this wasn't over. At 3:12 a.m., while everyone else finally dozed off, the neighbor's porch light flicked on. The one from the empty cabin. I watched it from the window for exactly 4 minutes. Then it turned off again. And somehow, I felt her watching back. The next morning, the sky was painfully clear, blue, like nothing had ever gone wrong. It felt like the storm had been a dream, except for the snow piled nearly to the windows and the gnawing certainty that the woman hadn't been a hallucination. Josh wouldn't stop staring at the neighbor's cabin. He pressed his nose to the frosty window and just watched. I asked what he was looking for. He didn't answer. His breath made little foggy circles on the glass. After breakfast, I tried to distract him with a snowball fight. He barely threw 2 before he wandered off. I chased after him. No way was I losing sight of him again. But he only circled behind our cabin and stood in front of the woods. "She's still out there," he said. "She's waiting for us to come back." I grabbed his hand. "She's not real." But he just looked at me. Then why does she knock at night? That evening, my parents radioed into town, just checking weather and power. The sheriff said he'd stop by tomorrow to check the cabin wiring. Weird time for outages, he'd said, like that explained anything. We all went to bed early, except me. I lay awake again, heart pounding every time the wind shook the window. The cabin creaked like it was exhaling something heavy. At some point, I drifted into a half-sleep, the kind where you're aware of your body but can't move it. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. But not from the front door. This time, it came from inside the cabin. The sound came again, closer now, like someone gently tapping the walls, moving down the hallway, room by room. My throat locked. I couldn't sit up, couldn't scream. Josh was still asleep beside me, somehow, or maybe not. His breathing sounded different, too slow. Then the sound stopped. Right outside our door, I heard the faint creak of wood. The knob turned, but it didn't open. Instead, something pressed against the door. Not a knock, a palm. I could feel the quiet pressure through the grain of the wood, like someone was trying to listen or feel who was inside. And then just as fast, the presence faded. The pressure lifted. The cabin fell back into silence. When I could move again, I jumped out of bed and opened the door. Nothing, no footprints, no sign of anyone. But the floor just outside was wet, a patch of melting snow. And something else. Hair, long strands, black, frozen at the ends, stuck to the wood like spider legs. The next morning I told my parents. I showed them. They didn't want to believe it, but they stopped arguing when my mom touched the strands and whispered, "It's still cold." The sheriff arrived just before noon. We told him everything. I expected him to laugh, to say we were imagining things, but he just looked at the neighbor's cabin, eyes narrowed. "You sure the door was open that first night?" he asked. I nodded. "Wide open, and someone was standing in it." He frowned. "That house hasn't had power in years. The owners moved to Arizona last spring, never came back. Said they were done with the snow." We stood in silence for a long time. Then he walked to the cabin and knocked. No answer. He checked the lock. It was rusted shut. He circled the house once, then came back with a pale face and a voice gone tight. "There's no snow disturbed on the other side. No tracks, nothing. It's like nobody's been within 10 feet of that place." That night, I begged my parents to let us leave early, but the roads were still closed, and sometime after midnight, the knocking returned. Only this time, there were 2 sets of knocks, one on our door, and one, faint but clear, echoing from the neighbor's cabin across the snow. On our last night at the cabin, the temperature dropped so low the air felt solid. The wind didn't howl anymore. It whispered, soft, steady, like it had grown patient. Josh and I stayed in the same room again. We didn't bother trying to sleep. We lay there, still and silent, blankets up to our necks, watching the shadows shift along the ceiling as the fire died. At 2:03 a.m., the lights flickered once, just once. But this time, the power didn't come back. A minute later, the porch light of the neighbor's cabin clicked on. Not ours. Theirs. I sat up. Josh did too, like he'd been waiting. "She's at the window now," he whispered. I turned slowly toward our room's only window. Frost coated the inside, delicate patterns like veins, and behind it, no more than 2 feet from my face, was the shadow of a figure. Not standing, not moving, floating. I couldn't see her face, just a soft outline in the snow glow, hair hanging like it was underwater, arms down, palms pressed flat to the glass. She stared through us, not at us, and her mouth was slightly open, as if she were humming something we couldn't hear. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. Josh stood. I grabbed his wrist, but he didn't resist. He wasn't sleepwalking. He was awake. "She says we left the door open," he said. We hadn't, but when I ran to check, heart slamming, our front door was unlocked, just slightly ajar. No footprints on the porch, just wind and cold. Josh slipped past me, walking barefoot across the floor. I shouted, but he didn't turn. I chased after him, out into the blizzard that had returned like it never left. The snow swallowed him fast, but I followed the trail of his feet. They led not to the woods, not toward our own cabin, but straight to the neighbor's, to the open doorway. She stood inside, same coat, same hair. Her eyes weren't shadowed now. They were pale, almost white, and they locked onto mine the moment I crossed into the threshold. Josh was behind her, but only half there, his outline flickering like light through water, like the storm was trying to take him. I lunged, grabbed his hand, and for the first time, she moved. She tilted her head and whispered, "You never closed it." With every ounce of strength, I pulled Josh back through the doorway and slammed it shut behind us. Instantly, the wind died. Everything went silent. We were no longer in the neighbor's cabin. We were back in ours, on the floor by the fireplace. Both of us soaked, shivering, but safe. My parents came rushing out, confused and afraid. demanding to know what happened. I couldn't explain. Not then. Maybe not ever. The next morning, the snow had vanished. All of it. Gone overnight, like it had been erased. The porch light on the neighbor's cabin was shattered, the door sealed shut with frost like welded glass. But the window in our room, it was clean. No frost, no handprints. Just a single, frozen strand of black hair resting on the sill. We left that day. We didn't come back the next winter or the one after that, but sometimes, in certain winds, I still hear her voice, and I always check the locks. Because doors that open on their own never close alone. Story 5. A New Jersey neighborhood nightmare. When we first moved into our house on Spruce Lane, I remember thinking it was too quiet. Not the bad kind of quiet, just the sort that settles in your ears like soft cotton. No traffic hum, no raised voices. A bird or two, a distant lawnmower, maybe a basketball hitting pavement down the block. The kind of place where the loudest thing was your own breath if you stepped outside at dusk. Berkeley Township was proud of being ordinary. Beige siding, manicured lawns, mailboxes shaped like eagles or fish. Every morning you saw the same routine. Joggers nodding silently, sprinklers hissing over dew, neighbors waving as they pulled out of driveways. We fit right in, or at least we did at first. John Adamo was the first to welcome us. He came over the day our moving truck pulled in, offered a bottle of cold water, and told us the garbage pickup schedule. I remember liking him. Thin, wiry guy, maybe early 50s at the time. Deep voice, dry hands. He had a dog named Radar, a black mutt that never barked, just stared. That first year was easy. We waved, swapped snow shoveling duties. Once he complimented my hedging, and I told him I liked the way he kept his hostas trimmed. We joked about how our yards looked like a mirror image. Maybe they were back then. It started with the fence. Just a sliver of misunderstanding, like a splinter you ignore until it gets infected. We had someone come out to install a new privacy fence along the side yard. Nothing flashy, just cedar boards with a clean top rail. The morning it went in, I saw John standing on his porch in a stiff posture, arms crossed. That evening, he knocked. Not angry, not yet, just sharp. "You know that line cuts into my property?" he said. I told him we'd checked the plot map. We had. I offered to look it over with him, but he shook his head. Said he'd have someone look into it. After that, no more waves, no more small talk. The no trespassing signs were next. Bright red, one nailed to a tree, another zip-tied to his gate. Didn't bother me at first. Maybe he had delivery drivers using the wrong driveway. Maybe he was just being careful. Then the cameras went up, 2 of them, one facing the sidewalk, the other pointed directly at our porch. I asked him once politely if they were recording sound. He didn't answer, just closed his door. I let it go. You learn to pick your battles when you've got kids, especially a kid recovering from chemo. We were trying to keep things normal, but it was like the air changed on our street. A few times I saw him near the hedges, just standing, hands at his sides, whispering something I couldn't make out. I'd call out, ask if he needed anything. No answer. He'd just drift away like smoke. Jill started bringing the mail in before sunset. My son stopped walking the dog near his yard. And me? I started checking our locks twice every night. I'd lie there in the dark and stare at the ceiling, my ears tuned to every creak in the floorboards, every groan of the house settling. It was nothing, I told myself, just a feud, a misunderstanding that would pass. But some nights, I'd swear I saw a shape move behind our curtains when I looked out from the upstairs window. Just a flicker, barely there. And eventually, I started waking up at night with the unmistakable feeling that someone was watching me from across the driveway. And maybe someone was. We never wanted the cameras. Jill said they'd make us feel paranoid, like we were waiting for something bad to happen. But after that winter, the signs, the way John stood in his yard just watching, our son insisted. He'd been through worse, that kid. 16 and already carrying more scars than most grown men. After chemo, he started tinkering with tech to stay distracted. So when he offered to mount outdoor cameras with night vision and motion alerts, I said yes. At first, it felt like overkill. A breeze would trigger the sensor. We'd get blurry footage of leaves twitching or a raccoon waddling by. I almost turned the system off, but then we caught him. It was around 2:30 a.m., early March. The wind was still. Our motion alert chimed on my phone. I tapped in expecting the usual: shadows, trees, maybe a car's headlights. Instead, there he was, John, pacing. He walked in slow circles on his side of the lawn, just outside the reach of our driveway light. Then he'd stop, stand perfectly still, and stare at our porch, right into the camera, his face blank, not angry, not afraid, just waiting. We watched it 3 times. Jill didn't speak the whole time. Then she just got up and turned off the porch light. That week, a cat went missing. A sweet old tabby named Ginger that belonged to the neighbors 2 doors down. We helped look. Flashlights, flyers, the whole thing. 2 days later, I found her collar, filthy, half buried, in the mulch bed beneath our mailbox. Jill tried to tell me it didn't mean anything. Maybe she dropped it or someone thought it was trash. But she didn't believe that. Neither did I. Then came the dead patches. Perfect rectangles of scorched grass, maybe 2 feet wide, appeared on our front lawn. Too clean to be from pets, too irregular for mower damage. The landscaper said it looked like bleach or pesticide had been poured deliberately in straight lines. I kept checking the footage. We saw nothing. Then, nails. Piles of roofing nails, rusted, crooked, scattered across our driveway in the dark. 3 mornings in a row, each time in a slightly different pattern. Our son stopped parking out front. I started keeping the outdoor lights on all night. It didn't help. One evening, the lights flickered, not the whole block, just our house. A second of darkness, then buzzing fluorescence. When the power returned, there was a note, folded, taped to the center of our front door. 6 words, printed in uneven black marker. I see what you're doing. We called the police. Of course we did. They came out, looked around, jotted things down. They took the note, said they'd follow up, asked if we had any witnesses. We showed them the video, John pacing, but it wasn't enough. No crime, they said, no physical evidence, no fingerprints. You can file a formal complaint, the officer offered, but unless he steps onto your property again, there's not much we can do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the front window, baseball bat across my lap, watching our cameras on loop. Jill stayed in bed, but I don't think she slept either. There was a weight in the house, not fear exactly, something colder, heavier. It didn't feel like we were being watched. It felt like we were being studied. And every time I checked the monitor, John's porch light was on. But the porch was empty. Or maybe I just couldn't see him. Yet, There's a kind of silence that doesn't belong in a neighborhood. It's not peace, it's not quiet, it's pressure. That was what settled into our house after the note, after the nails and the camera footage and Ginger's collar. We didn't talk about John anymore, not directly, but he was in every glance, every late-night flicker of light, every time we found the side gate unlatched when we swore we'd locked it. It was my son who suggested the rule. He called it the glass shatter rule. If anything breaks, he said, we don't wait. We call. Not if we see someone, not if we hear something, just broken glass. That would be our line in the sand. We needed it. We needed something to hold on to, something we could say out loud, a boundary that didn't rely on whispers or suspicion, because by then, nothing felt solid anymore. It started with the tapping, not random, not the wind, not branches. This was intentional. Just after midnight, tap, tap, tap on the kitchen window, always the same rhythm, like fingers, slow and steady. We'd rush to look, nothing. The back porch camera, blank. Another night, the same pattern, this time on the upstairs bathroom window. Then, a week later, the basement. We didn't sleep, we just listened. And then Jill saw someone in the hallway. She screamed, real, raw, immediate. I ran up from the den with the bat in hand, heart slamming so hard I couldn't breathe. Nothing, no one, just a coat on a hook casting a long, distorted reflection from the living room lamp. She apologized. I hugged her, but the air didn't go back to normal. It never did. We finally confronted John in broad daylight. Jill stood beside me. I figured we had to try once more to end it, or at least say we tried. He was out in his front yard pretending to weed, hands moving dirt around that didn't need moving. I said his name. He didn't look up. Jill tried. We just want peace, John, that's all, for everyone's sake. He stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, stared straight through us. Then he said, flat as a dead battery, I tried being polite. You had your chance. He turned and walked back inside. That night, I noticed something. One of his upstairs windows, narrow with peeling trim, was open. It had rained earlier, not a sprinkle, a downpour, and still it stayed open the next night and the next. Even when the storm rolled in, loud and mean, hammering the roofs and flooding the street gutters, his window stayed open. I told myself maybe he was airing the place out. Maybe the guy liked the cold, but I knew better. He was listening. Then came 3:17 a.m. I'll never forget the exact time because I was staring at the bedside clock when the crash hit. A thunderous, splintering smash from downstairs. Glass shattered. I grabbed the bat, yelled for Jill to stay upstairs, and raced down, barefoot, heartbeat crashing in my ears louder than the storm. The kitchen window was blown inward, shards everywhere, and in the center of the floor, a heavy ceramic flower pot, cracked down the middle. The soil had spilled like blood. No plant, just dirt. I stood frozen, waiting for movement outside, anything, but there was nothing, just the wind and the sound of rain slicing through the hole where our window used to be. I called the police. They came, again, walked the perimeter, again, knocked on John's door. He answered in a bathrobe, hair dry, like he hadn't even noticed the storm. I was sleeping, he said. Must have been kids. They asked if he'd seen or heard anything. He looked at them, then at me, and said, I sleep like a rock. No fingerprints on the pot, no footprints in the mud, nothing they could act on. But I knew he had crossed the line. The rule had been broken, And from that night forward, I slept downstairs with the bat in one hand and the phone in the other, waiting, because something told me the next time it wouldn't be a flower pot. It was the kind of day that doesn't warn you. The sky was clear, the breeze gentle, and the air had that early spring smell like thawed soil and budding trees. Jill was inside folding laundry. I stepped out to grab the package that had just been dropped on the front step. I remember thinking how normal it all felt. Then I saw him, John, standing just across the street at the edge of his driveway, arms at his sides, body still, like he'd been planted there. He wasn't mowing or sweeping or fiddling with his hedges. He was just watching. The box was in my hand when I saw the glint, not a reflection, not sun on glass, metal. I heard the sound before the pain. One loud crack, a sharp pull in my shoulder, hot and hard, like something had been ripped out of me. I fell, fast and heavy, onto the concrete. Jill screamed from inside the house. Then another shot. Glass shattered behind me. I couldn't turn my head, but I knew what it meant. I tried to yell her name, but the sound came out like a cough. Blood was in my throat. The air filled with noise, shouts, dogs barking, a child crying in the distance. Doors slammed, tires screeched. I saw neighbors ducking behind hedges, peeking from doorways, and John, he just turned, calm, walked backward up his driveway like nothing had happened, step by step. He didn't run. He didn't even flinch. He reached his front door, opened it, looked out one last time. Then he closed it behind him, like he was done. I don't remember much after that. Medics, hands pressing into my shoulder, a stretcher, the smell of blood mixing with the scent of sun-warmed grass. Then nothing. Darkness. When I woke up, my shoulder was wrapped, bolted into place, tubes and machines. Jill was in the room next door, alive, breathing, barely. A detective came in later. Quiet voice, steady hands. He told me it had ended quickly. SWAT arrived, loudspeakers, commands, no response. They breached the house just before dusk. They found him upstairs. Bedroom, single shot, gone, no manifesto, no explanation, just him and the weapon and that open window that never once shut. They asked me if I saw it coming. I didn't answer, because I had. Not in so many words, not in a direct line, but something had been coming. You can only stretch tension so long before something snaps. Now the house across from ours is empty. The cameras are gone. The window is boarded. But the street doesn't feel the same, and neither do I. There's a mark on the porch where my blood dried into the concrete. They tried to scrub it, but it's still faintly there, a rust-colored memory. We wave to the neighbors again now, but it's different. The kind of wave that says, we're still here. Not because it's safe, just because we survived. Story 6. Murder on Walnut Lane. Narrator, Linda Beeks. The steps creaked again this morning, same as yesterday, same as the day before. They always did when the air turned cooler, like the concrete was remembering how to complain. East Walnut Lane used to feel quieter in the fall. The row houses pressed close, breathing down one another's necks. Their porches sagged with age, their bricks swollen from seasons of heat and ice. We all shared space, stoops, railings, even the sidewalk. And most of us shared it without fuss. But not Alvin Berry. He lived right next door, same narrow frame, same sagging gutters, but he was different. Office, he never waved, never nodded, just stared. Through the blinds, from the porch, sometimes through the mail slot, eyes like static. I remember the first real spark, trash bins. Ours were a few inches past the line, apparently his invisible line. He knocked over both cans with his cane and muttered something I couldn't hear. I called out, "That necessary?" He didn't answer, just walked back inside like a whisper disappearing behind a door. From then on, it was small things, petty things, a delivery gone missing, a ripped screen on the porch, footprints in the snow that stopped right at our window. But there was one thing I couldn't shake, the crack. It started small, barely noticeable, on the shared step that led to our front doors. I thought it was just wear, but one morning I caught him kneeling down with a screwdriver, scraping slow, deliberate lines into the concrete. He didn't even stop when he noticed me watching. "You're damaging city property," I said, trying to sound stern. He didn't answer, just ran the metal deeper across the stone like he was writing something only he could read. When I told Clinton, he laughed at first. "He's crazy, but not dangerous," he said. "Probably thinks it's art." But to me, it wasn't art. It was a warning, a split in stone that didn't belong. It ran right between our feet every time we unlocked the door, a jagged fault line, shallow, but getting deeper, like him. I tried to ignore it. We went on with our lives, groceries, appointments, daytime TV, and too many cups of tea. Still, every time I stepped outside, I saw that crack. I saw it, and I heard him behind the blinds, watching, breathing too quietly, waiting. And somehow, I knew he didn't draw a line in the concrete. He was drawing a conclusion, one he planned to finish. Narrator, Clinton Quarles. People think you get used to sharing space when you live in a row house. That's not true. You learn to ignore certain things. Footsteps through the walls, muffled voices behind the drywall, front doors that slam too close to yours. But used to it? Number. You just carry it like a coat that doesn't quite fit. The stoop was the battleground. Always had been. Our chairs sat out there every morning, hers by the right rail, mine on the left. But somehow, over the years, they started creeping. An inch here, a foot back, until one day my folding chair was accused of trespassing. I laughed at first, a joke surely, but Alvin didn't laugh. "You're on my side," he said flatly one afternoon without warning. "Stay off my side." That was the first time I noticed how he said my like he bought it. Like the city didn't own the concrete. Like we didn't live here too. I tried to reason with him, knocked on his door once, grocery bag still in hand. He opened the screen halfway, stared through it with eyes like flat glass. Didn't speak, just stood there. I remember how my hand started sweating, just from him looking, the kind of silence that pushes back. After that day, I started checking the locks twice, then 3 times. Not just the front door, windows, basement, back fence. It wasn't just a feeling. Things were off. Clinton's law of yard physics, I used to joke. If a rake hasn't moved in 5 years and suddenly it's on your porch, someone put it there. Our hose looped differently. A garden spade unearthed. Tools that belonged in the shed now lying on the steps like breadcrumbs. I asked Linda once, "Did you move the hedge clippers?" She shook her head. "Did you?" No one touched them, but they moved. At night, I'd sometimes catch movement through his front window. Just a flicker of motion, like a curtain shifting after someone walks past. He didn't have pets, didn't have guests. That house was quiet as a tomb, until it wasn't. The worst was the sound. Late one night, I heard it through the shared wall, metal scraping, slow and steady, a rhythm too deliberate to be anything natural. I got up, pressed my ear to the plastic. 5, 6, 7 scrapes. Then silence, like he wanted me to hear it, just enough to wonder. I asked him the next morning just once in passing, "You working on something?" He blinked at me like I spoke a foreign language, then turned and went inside. That's when I realized he wasn't ignoring us. He was watching us, tracking our patterns, where we sat, when we left, what time we came back, and the crack, the one on the step. I saw him running his finger down it once like it was a map, like he was planning something or already had. We lived next to a man for over a decade, but I don't think we ever knew him. Not really. We only knew the shell, and that shell was starting to crack just like the stoop. Narrator, Diashani Diego, neighbor, witness. It was a quiet fall afternoon, one of those rare ones where the wind moves just enough to shuffle the leaves, but not enough to chill your skin. I had the window cracked open, letting the breeze roll in. I remember thinking how peaceful it was. Then it shattered. First came the snap. Not like a car backfiring, sharper, hung in the air. My first thought was fireworks, even though no one lights fireworks in October. But then came the second shot, closer, heavier. I froze. I moved to the window, slow at first. My fingers shook before I touched the curtain. I wish I hadn't looked. Linda was on the ground, knees buckled, one arm still halfway raised like she was trying to shield herself. There were groceries spilled on the stoop, a plastic bag with oranges split open, rolling down the steps like marbles. Her husband was next to her, still holding a loaf of bread, frozen in a motion he'd never finish. Then I saw him. Alvin Berry stood across the street, rifle braced tight to his shoulder. No panic, no rage, just stillness, like a man watering a lawn. His eyes didn't blink, his stance didn't shift. He fired again. Linda jerked. She was already down, but he shot her again. I must have screamed. I think I did, but I don't remember the sound. Everything went muffled, like I was underwater. Then another crack, louder. Clinton fell backward against the railing, slumped where the stoop curved down toward the sidewalk. He clutched his chest like he could hold something in, like he could press life back inside. Alvin didn't stop. He raised the rifle again. Another shot, another, then the last one. Clinton stopped moving. I was halfway to calling 911 when I looked up again and saw the barrel of the rifle swing upward. He turned it on himself. No hesitation, no last words, no gesture. Just up, then bang! He crumpled backward, legs folding awkwardly beneath him, his body hitting the pavement like someone cutting strings. Silence returned. Not peace, just absence. A horrible, gasping emptiness that filled the street. I stared at the three bodies, one across the way, two on the steps, blood mixing with scattered fruit and the rustle of brown grocery bags. It looked like a painting that had gone wrong. Too much red, not enough reason. I'd seen Alvin before, many times. Always quiet, always alone. I figured he was just strange, the kind of neighbor who minds his own business and grumbles at trash day. We all have one. I never saw this. What gets me is his face. Even now, I keep seeing it. Not angry, not wild, just empty, like he'd left hours before he pulled the trigger. Narrator, Linda Beeks, posthumous, memory fragments. It's strange, the things you remember in the end. Plastic crinkling in my hand, oranges rolling toward the street, the weight of eggs shifting in the back against my hip. And then the sound. Not thunder, not firecrackers, just a clean cutting crack that split the world in half. I think I turned. I think I looked up. I want to say I saw his face, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I only felt it, cold, focused, like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. There was something in his hands, long, metallic, raised like a question with only one answer, then silence, red, falling. I don't remember pain, just the sudden folding of time, like being pulled backward into a place I'd never been before, a place I couldn't leave. Clinton was still beside me. I think he said my name. I think he dropped the bread. It bounced down the steps like it didn't belong in this moment. And there, on the stoop, I saw the line again, that crack down the middle. He carved it. I remember that now, not just etched, carved, like it was meant to stay long after we were gone. I had asked him what he was doing that day. He didn't answer. He just kept scraping, slow and steady, like the sound of it calmed him. He told Clinton once, "That step's mine. Don't cross it again." But of course we did. We had to. It was our house, too. Still, I think that crack meant something to him, a border, a boundary, maybe even a warning. Was this always his plan? I keep replaying it. The words we said, the words we didn't. We thought it was harmless, muttering, eye rolls, little things. The trash bins, the railing, a misplaced lawn chair. But I see it now. It was a build-up, like pressure behind a wall no one knew was crumbling. We didn't see him unraveling, or maybe we did, and didn't believe it could ever lead here, not to this. Now the stoop is empty, oranges flattened on the pavement, blood in the grooves of the concrete. That crack still there. Only now it means something else. It's not just a line. It's the last thing we ever shared. Story 7, the number next door. You never expect to start over with fear hanging over you like a storm cloud. When I signed the lease on the duplex, it felt like a reset. Something clean, something hopeful. Just me and Noah. A 2-year-old doesn't ask for much beyond safety, snacks, and a place to chase shadows. I thought this little place, tucked at the edge of a quiet suburban street, would be perfect. The move was quiet. No welcome wagon, no curious neighbors peeking over fences. The other half of the duplex looked empty, shades drawn tight, no sound behind the walls. Fine by me. After everything with Noah's father, silence was a gift. By the second evening, we'd made it feel like home. Our battered but beloved couch sat under the window. A photo of me and Noah from a beach trip last year smiled out from the mantel. I let him pick where to put his stuffed elephant. He chose the corner of the sofa, as if it were guarding us. I even found time to put down a little blue welcome mat I'd bought at a discount store. "Home, sweet home," it said in loopy script. I remember smiling when I stepped back to look at it. It felt real. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown. Number. "Welcome to the neighborhood, neighbor." I frowned. No name, no contact photo. I stared at the screen for a minute, debating whether to respond. Eventually, I just typed, "Me. Thanks." "Who is this?" No reply. It was probably nothing. A wrong number, maybe someone in the complex trying to be friendly, but something about it felt off. The phrasing was stiff, like it had been rehearsed. I brushed it off and tucked Noah in. He wanted a story about dinosaurs and monsters. I gave him both, kissed his forehead, and shut his door. The baby monitor's green light blinked steady. Stillness returned. Later that night, as I curled under a blanket and watched some crime show rerun half distracted, I checked my phone again. No new messages. Maybe I was being silly, paranoid. I powered off the phone and tried to let the comfort of normalcy lull me into sleep. But here's the thing I've learned since. Sometimes the smallest things are the loudest warnings. A text, a word, a whisper on the edge of something darker. The next morning, a second message was waiting. Unknown number. Hope you and Noah slept well. My heart dropped. I hadn't told anyone his name. Not even the landlord knew, unless he saw it on paperwork. I stared at the message until my coffee went cold. Outside, the sky was cloudless and blue. Birds chirped like everything was fine. But I knew better. Something had already found its way in, and it knew our names. At first, I tried to stay rational. The first message had unnerved me, yes, but people get wrong numbers all the time. Maybe someone meant to text a friend. Maybe it was just a prank. The second message, the one that mentioned Noah by name, that was harder to shrug off. I didn't answer it. I didn't even show it to anyone. I just kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. I'd posted a moving announcement on social media a few weeks earlier. Maybe a friend of a friend saw it? Still, I started checking the locks twice before bed. I moved Noah's crib a little farther from the window. 3 days after we moved in, I stepped out to grab a grocery delivery and found a third message. Unknown. Number. The blue mat is a nice touch, so friendly, just like you. I froze mid-step. The phone trembled slightly in my hand. My welcome mat. I had placed it that morning, right after Noah's breakfast. No photos, no visitors, no way anyone could have known about it unless they were close, watching. I looked up and down the street. Perfectly ordinary. Trimmed hedges, cars parked tight against the curb, the kind of neighborhood where the biggest event was garbage pickup. But every window suddenly felt like a pair of eyes. And then I noticed something else. A man across the street, sitting in his car, engine off, just sitting, staring straight ahead. I turned quickly and went back inside. That night, the texts kept coming. Unknown number. Noah's favorite color is green, right? Unknown number. You have a nice laugh. Heard it today at 3:42. Each one was like a pin prick under the skin. Sharp, invisible, and impossible to ignore. But the worst came on the 6th day. I woke up to find another message waiting. This time, it had a photo attached. It was my front door, not from the porch, not from a ring cam. From across the street, zoomed in just enough to blur the edges, but clear enough that I recognized the wreath I'd hung and the small chip in the paint by the mailbox. Unknown number. Nice house, Sam. We'll be neighbors soon. I read that message again and again. My name wasn't Sam. It never had been. But somehow that made it worse. Like whoever was sending these had done this before. Like maybe I wasn't the first. I tried to distract myself. I played blocks with Noah. I made lists of groceries I didn't really need. I told myself I would change my number if it kept going, but I didn't. I kept waiting, hoping it would stop. That night, another message came in as I was tucking Noah in. Unknown number. See you soon, neighbor. Same words, again, every time. I left every light in the house on. I slept with my phone clutched in one hand and a kitchen knife on the nightstand. It's strange how quickly fear becomes routine. I started memorizing license plates on cars that parked near the house. I memorized the creak in the floorboards by Noah's door, the exact time the garbage truck passed, the shape of the shadows outside my bedroom window. By the end of the week, I knew one thing for certain. Someone was watching. And they wanted me to know it. It started just after midnight. Noah had been asleep for hours, his little chest rising and falling in that rhythm only toddlers have. Deep, peaceful, untouched by worry. I wasn't so lucky. I lay in bed, eyes locked on the ceiling, feeling the weight of something I couldn't name pressing down on my chest. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Blocked number. Still awake? I didn't reply. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether silence or confrontation was the safer path. I turned the phone over, face down. A moment later, it buzzed again, and then the calls began. No name, no number, just blocked, one after another, relentless. I finally picked up on the fourth ring, more out of frustration than courage. "Hello?" I whispered. There was no voice, just a long, low sound, like a distorted electric hum, a mechanical buzz that made the hairs rise on my arms. It wasn't static. It wasn't silence. It was wrong. I hung up. The phone rang again almost immediately. I let it go this time, but it didn't stop. Call after call. Always the same dead hum on the other end. When the calls finally ceased, I sat there frozen, the silence even worse than the buzzing. That's when the tapping started. Light, deliberate, not the random creak of settling wood or a branch brushing the siding. This was rhythmic. 3 taps, a pause, then 2. I tiptoed to the front window, pulling the curtain just an inch aside. Nothing. Street lights glowed over an empty sidewalk. The tapping came again. I turned toward the sound. It was coming from the side of the house now, then the back. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just moved slowly toward the front door, phone still in hand, every step filled with dread. When I looked through the peephole, I saw only the porch, empty. But something was there. I could feel it. I slowly unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just a crack. No one. But as I pulled it shut again, something caught in the frame, a small folded note. I plucked it free with trembling fingers. It wasn't in an envelope, just a scrap of lined notebook paper folded twice and wedged tight between the door and frame. I opened it. 5 words, all in neat, blocky handwriting. "You can't hide, Sarah." I slammed the door and locked it again, all 3 locks this time. That night, I sat in the hallway outside Noah's room with a flashlight and the kitchen knife from the night before. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I didn't know how they got so close, how they knew so much. But I was starting to realize this wasn't random. It wasn't a prank. Someone wanted me to be afraid, and it was working. I used to think paranoia was something that happened to other people, those who watched too many thrillers or read too many crime blogs. But now, it was my daily companion. Every creak, every flicker of shadow felt personal, like it was aimed directly at me. The duplex's other half had always been quiet. Too quiet. The curtains never moved. The mailbox never filled. No cars came or went. At first I assumed the place was vacant. Now I wasn't so sure. That week, I started noticing small things. Like how the porch light next door would flick on for just a few seconds whenever I opened my front door. Or how sometimes, when I passed by the living room window, I'd catch a glimpse of the neighbor's curtain edge twitching like someone had just let it fall. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. Someone was watching me, and I was starting to think they weren't across the street. They were on the other side of my wall. The texts hadn't stopped. They'd changed. No more vague greetings or grainy photos. Now they were specific, creepy, in a new way. Unknown number. The yellow cup on the coffee table. Cute. Noah's favorite, right? Unknown number. You cleaned the hallway rug today, but you missed a spot near the edge. I hadn't opened the blinds once that day, and I hadn't spoken to a single neighbor. Someone wasn't watching from a distance anymore. They were close. I contacted the police again. A young officer came out to the house. I showed him the texts, the photo, the note from the door. He was polite, concerned even, but said without a number to trace or a direct threat, there was nothing they could do. Final story. The unzipped secret. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever really happened, and that's exactly why I moved there. Rows of modest houses, manicured lawns, and the gentle lull of sprinklers clicking to life at dusk. It was suburban peace wrapped in sunshine and predictability. After a year of chaos in the city, I was starving for quiet. The house next to mine had been empty for weeks before I noticed someone new moving in. A slim woman, probably in her 30s, with pale skin and dark hair, always tied in a loose bun. She was quiet, but polite, soft-spoken, in a way that made every word feel deliberate. Her name was Elise. We started exchanging pleasantries over the backyard fence. Nothing deep, just brief chats about the weather, flowers, or neighborhood quirks. What made her stand out, though, was Klaus, her dog. A large, muscular Doberman with sleek black fur and eyes too intelligent for comfort. He was unnervingly obedient, always at her heel or sitting perfectly still while she spoke to me. Never barking, never tugging at the leash, just watching. At first, I liked Klaus. He had an air of dignity, not the usual slobbering energy most big dogs carried. But one afternoon, as I was watering my petunias, Klaus rolled over in the grass and stretched out under the sun. That's when I saw it. A zipper, metal, clean, running straight down the center of his stomach. At first, I thought it was some kind of bizarre joke, a costume harness or a scar from surgery. I stared, blinking, unsure if I was seeing it right. The teeth of the zipper were embedded into the dog's skin, not attached, fused, like they were part of him. The next time I saw Elise, I tried to laugh it off. Hey, I couldn't help but notice Klaus has a zipper? She smiled. Not a warm smile. More like the kind you give when someone's asked a question they shouldn't have. It's just a safety measure, she said lightly. Nothing to worry about. That should have been the end of it. Most people would have shrugged it off. Maybe assumed it was some new veterinary innovation or bizarre body mod for pets. But something about the way she said it, too casual, too dismissive, made my skin prickle. She changed the subject quickly, complimenting my flowers and walking off with Klaus trotting silently behind her. But the image of that zipper stayed with me. I started to pay more attention, and that was my first mistake. I wanted to forget about the zipper. I told myself it was probably just some strange medical device or cosmetic procedure, something people do to their pets these days that I wasn't up to date on. But Klaus made that impossible. The zipper wasn't sewn on like a costume. It wasn't just there. It belonged. The metal looked aged but flawless, the way old steel does when it's been cared for but not replaced. I could see each tooth of it glinting in the sunlight when Klaus rolled in the grass or stretched after waking. Not even scar tissue around it, just smooth, uninterrupted skin that flowed into cold metal like it was grown that way. The more I saw it, the more it disturbed me. Sometimes Klaus would sit on Elise's porch while she talked with me over the fence. He rarely barked, never wagged his tail. But when Elise wasn't looking, when our eyes met and she wasn't paying attention, Klaus would let out the faintest growl, low, steady, deliberate, like a warning meant only for me. There was something intelligent behind that sound. Not animal instinct, intention. One evening, well past dusk, I was on my back deck sipping tea and watching the stars when I heard something strange. A mechanical hum, faint but constant, coming from Elise's house. Not loud, but rhythmic, like gears turning or maybe a generator. It went on for almost 20 minutes before cutting off suddenly. The next morning, I asked her about it as casually as I could. "Your house, does it have a workshop or something? I thought I heard, I don't know, machinery last night." She smiled too quickly, that same plastic calm I was starting to recognize in her. "You must have heard my humidifier. Klaus has a few sensitivities." She changed the subject immediately, asking if I'd seen the squirrels digging in her tomatoes. But her house had no tomatoes, not a single plant in her yard. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the sound, that whirring mechanical buzz, the way Klaus growled when no one else could hear him, the zipper that gleamed in the sun like a threat, and the way Elise spoke, just a safety measure. Safety for who? That question followed me into sleep, and even then I wasn't ready for what was coming. It was a dry, golden afternoon, the kind where the sun lingers too long and the air smells like dust and cut grass. I was kneeling in my garden bed, coaxing the last of the carrots from the soil, when I heard a sharp snap of claws on pavement. I looked up, just in time to see a gray and white tabby dart into Elise's yard. I didn't even have time to call out. Klaus moved like a wire pulled tight, then released. 1 second he was lying by the porch, the next he was a streak of motion. He hit the cat mid-sprint. The sound was wet and fast, like someone tearing cloth underwater. The cat didn't even cry out. It didn't have the chance. I froze, still holding a dirt-caked carrot. Klaus stood over the shredded mess, his black coat gleaming, muzzle dripping red. For a breathless moment, he didn't move. He just stared at me, not Elise, me. Then the back door slammed open. "Klaus!" Elise's voice cracked like a whip. She marched across the yard and grabbed him by the collar without flinching at the blood. No panic, no remorse. Her face was cold and focused, like she was correcting a defective appliance. He didn't resist. Not a single growl, not a twitch. She hauled him inside and shut the door with a soft click that somehow chilled me more than a slam would have. I should have walked away. I should have gone inside, drawn the curtains, and pretended I'd seen nothing. But something kept me rooted there, half hidden behind my trellis. My legs prickled with pins and needles from kneeling too long, but I didn't dare move. Through her kitchen window, I watched. Elise moved calmly, methodically. She opened a drawer, pulled out a pair of long kitchen shears, and turned toward Klaus. He stood perfectly still in the center of the kitchen, like he knew what came next. Then, with the delicacy of someone unsealing a gift, she knelt and slid the shears along his belly. Click! Zip! The zipper parted. There was no blood, no pain response. Klaus didn't flinch. Inside, nothing, just darkness. I couldn't see much from my angle, but her arm went in deep, deeper than a human arm should go. Up to the shoulder, her expression didn't change. She looked like she was adjusting a dial or replacing a part, like this was a routine procedure. Then Klaus shuddered just once and collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut, dead, silent. She withdrew her arm, wiped her hand with a dish towel, and zipped him shut with eerie precision. The click of the zipper echoed through the window like the closing of a coffin. She lifted his body, so gently, cradling him like a child, and carried him outside to the porch. She laid him there as though he were sleeping, head resting on his paws, eyes closed. Then, without a word, she got in her car and drove away. I didn't breathe until her tail lights vanished, and still I stood there, carrot forgotten in my hand, watching the porch, watching Klaus, waiting for something, anything to make sense. But it didn't. Nothing did. Not the zipper, not the calmness, not the way the light caught his fur like he could still stand at any moment. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with the porch in full view, afraid to blink, because I was certain if I looked away, Klaus would get back up. I should have turned away, should have pulled the blinds and buried myself in the comfort of ignorance. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I stayed frozen behind my kitchen window, fingers gripping the sill so hard my knuckles went white. Through the glass across the fence, I watched her work on Klaus like she was fixing a broken toaster. Elise didn't speak, didn't flinch. She moved with purpose. She knelt beside Klaus's motionless body in the center of her kitchen floor. His legs sprawled unnaturally, the fur along his belly parted wide where the zipper had been undone. From my angle, I expected a mess, blood, tissue, something real and mortal, but there wasn't a drop. What I saw was darkness, not the absence of light kind of dark. This was dense, full, like the space inside him wasn't a cavity but a void. Her arm disappeared into it up to the elbow, then the shoulder. I pressed a hand to my mouth. She adjusted something inside. I could see the tension in her forearm, fingers working with surgical precision. Then, without warning, Klaus jerked. His whole body seized, legs kicking once before falling limp like a marionette with its string snapped. It was over in a blink. Elise didn't panic. Her face stayed eerily blank. She slid her arm out, dry, unstained, and reached for the zipper, dragging the metal teeth shut in a single smooth motion. The sound of it, even through the window, made my stomach turn. Click. Done. She sat back for a moment, one hand resting on the dog's back as if comforting it. Then she stood, scooped him up with strange tenderness, and carried him outside. I rushed to my front window just in time to see her place Klaus gently on the porch. His body was curled like he was just dozing in the sun, paws tucked beneath him, mouth slack, but peaceful. She went back inside. Moments later, I heard the car start. She drove away without looking back. No leash, no crate, no sign she was coming back. The sun began to set. The sky burned orange and purple. Klaus didn't move. Neither did I. I watched until the dark swallowed everything. My house felt wrong after that, heavy with silence. The air buzzed faintly like it was waiting. Every creak of the floor made me flinch. Every shadow outside looked too sharp, too deliberate. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw. There was no panic in her movements, no emotion at all, like Klaus wasn't a pet, or even alive, just something she used and whatever was inside him, it wasn't right. I wanted to pretend it was some advanced prosthetic, some surgical marvel. But that's a lie you tell yourself to stay sane. What I saw in that kitchen was impossible, and yet it happened. Right there behind a window I'd stared through 100 times before, right next door. By morning, I'd find out just how deep this horror went. But that night, I stood at the edge of sleep, terrified of the silence, terrified of the porch, terrified of Klaus, terrified of what might still be inside him. I didn't sleep that night. The image wouldn't leave my head. That interior, that impossible, alive interior, not organs, not wires. It writhed, pulsed, like it knew I was looking, like it noticed me. By dawn, I dragged myself to the front window, hoping, absurdly, that everything would be normal again. But Elise's car was gone. Her house sat dark, curtains drawn, mailbox stuffed full of unopened envelopes that fluttered in the breeze like mute warnings. The porch was empty. Klaus was gone. I don't know how long I stood there. Part of me wanted to march next door, demand answers. Another part knew I'd never find any. Still, I checked. I walked over, hesitating at her gate. It creaked open with a reluctant groan. The yard was too quiet. No rustle of paws, no barking, just stillness. Her back door was unlocked. I shouldn't have gone inside. I knew that even as I crossed the threshold. But I had to. Some primitive instinct wanted to confirm she was real, that all of this wasn't some elaborate delusion. The house was abandoned, but not emptied. Everything was still there, furniture, dishes, half-open drawers. No signs of a struggle, no signs of a rushed exit. It looked like she had just stepped out. But the air had changed, heavy, pressurized, like walking into a room that had been sealed for too long. Then I found the kitchen. The floor where Klaus had lain was spotless, not even a stray hair. But something was off about the tiles near the center, just barely misaligned, like they'd been lifted and replaced. My curiosity overpowered my fear. I pried one loose with a kitchen knife. Beneath it was nothing. No insulation, no subflooring, just a deep, dark shaft descending into blackness, as though the ground beneath the house had been scooped away entirely. It wasn't natural, it wasn't man-made, and it wasn't empty. I heard something below, not movement, more like breathing, deep, rhythmic, patient. I dropped the tile and ran. I haven't been back since. A real estate company eventually came to clear out the place, but it sat on the market for months, untouched. People claimed to hear noises, scratching, humming, clicks like the teeth of a zipper sliding open in the night. The house is sold now. New family moved in. Young couple, baby on the way. They seem nice. Sometimes I see them in their backyard, laughing over the fence. Like Elise and I once did. They have a dog. I try not to look at it too closely, but every so often, when the light hits just right, I swear I see a glint of metal in its belly. And then I close my curtains. Every time. Some secrets are better left zipped.